All right, let's go, because you know what I came in to do.
I don't get paid for overtime. I'm here to fight.
Walk like a duck, walk like a duck. Yo, George, how do ducks walk?
BAKOLE responds to critics that say his organization, the WBO, is a sycophant to Bob Arum and Top Rank. He also reveals that Virgil Ortiz Jr. turned down a fight with Terence Crawford two times, as the mandatory. All right, let's get this out of the way quickly. Replying to the sycophantic comment about Top Rank and Bob Arum, that's not new, but what's put that back in the public spotlight right now is the Josh Taylor-Teofimo Lopez fight. Because that fight started online first, with them calling each other out, Bob co-signing it, and then the WBO ordering it, leaving Jack Catterall in the cold. So we got that out of the way. Here's what I want to talk about. Up till recently, I've been saying, I know Virgil don't really want this fight. I've never felt it. It's blatant clout chasing from Golden Boy. And I'm not saying Virgil is scared. He's just not ready. He doesn't believe he's ready. Golden Boy don't believe he's ready. Maybe later this year or next year, if Crawford hasn't lost by that time, they might get themselves a little confidence. If they see Crawford fight and there's a little slippage there in their opinion, they might go for it then. It's all about timing, isn't it, for Virgil Ortiz and Golden Boy? But it seems like there's a few welterweights trying to age out Terence Crawford. Might be the best strategy to beating him, because he probably is the best fighter in the sport. Like Golden Boy, Oscar's been doing a lot of loud talking about Al Heyman not wanting to fights happen, and Hopkins, he's been doing a lot of talking too. But all that time, they've been protecting Virgil. I knew this already, in all honesty, but it's nice to have the receipt. The receipt is always good. I love the receipt. Then we got this mess here we need to try and pick apart. The Congolese boxer at Martin BAKOLE, 01, maintains the date of his fight with the boxer at Michael Hunter. I imagine that means date has been confirmed. He also confirms that the American boxer at Michael Hunter has not yet accepted a fight. He is currently looking for another opponent at Serge and Conde, whoever he is. Michael Hunter replies, Michael Hunter II, his dad used to be a pro heavyweight too. He was pretty good as well. Lies at boxer. I would gladly knock out at Martin BAKOLE, 01 again. For those who don't know, Martin was previously stopped by Michael in 2018 at the York Hall in 10 rounds. Now, you have to watch out if you're a promoter, manager, or trainer that you don't make your boxer look bad. Talking a lot of good stuff until the receipts come back and people are saying, what? So here's Billy Nelson. He says, just to clarify things, at Michael Hunter had 2 opportunities to rematch at Martin BAKOLE in November and December, both turned down. Since then, things have changed. Martin has a new promoter, boxer, Benn. He's highest ranked WBA, plus more importantly, Michael has no ranking, new fish to fry. See, they're trying to chase this Daniel Dubois fight, because Daniel has that second tier belt that Martin is ranked number 1 for. Now, whether Frank's going to go for that. But Michael replies and says, bullshit. I was scheduled to fight October the 29th against Hughie Fury. How would the November or December date happen? January 25th was offered and declined by BAKOLE, said Benn. After Michael Hunter pulled that stunt with Hergovich and went to Triller to fight Michael Wilson and said it was all about business after selling all these wolf tickets, that he was the boogeyman. Well, he didn't sell them. The fans bought into this whole notion that he was the boogeyman. He hasn't fought since 2021, December. He needs a fight. He needs a check. I very much doubt he's going to duck someone he's beat already. I think Martin would have fought Michael if he didn't have this new situation with Benn and they're targeting Daniel Dubois, who apparently he beat up in sparring. So the easier fight in Billy and Martin's eyes, and Benn perhaps, is targeting Daniel, who looked very vulnerable last time out. And Michael, although he looked terrible actually against Jerry Forrest, I thought Jerry had a shout on the scorecards. It was a draw, wasn't it? Wasn't it a draw? It was a draw. I'd still argue that he has a higher boxing IQ than Daniel Dubois, especially if Hasim Ratman's in the corner. I don't like what Billy's saying about the 2 dates late last year. I don't believe him. Michael was penciled in to fight Hughie in October, which means he wouldn't have been able to fight BAKOLE in November, unless Billy's saying, yeah, we offered to step in because Hughie pulled out. Nah, I don't think so. I believe Billy and Martin would need a full camp to take on Hunter, who had beat them previously. Let's not forget, Billy and Martin also pulled out of that Hrgovic eliminator after Michael did. Several fighters pulled out.
Right, let's bring you a breaking story from the world of boxing, and it regards Conor Benn, who is to return to the WBC rankings after they deemed his highly elevated consumption of eggs was a reasonable explanation for his failed drugs test last year. You might remember that Benn tested positive for a banned substance ahead of a bout with Chris Eubank. It had been scheduled to take place in October last year at a catchweight. The banned substance is known as clomiphene, and after he tested positive for it, adverse findings uncovered, and then the British Boxing Board of Control prohibited the bout with Eubank Jr. from taking place. The promoters eventually cancelled it, and then the WBC removed Benn from their world rankings after he failed the VADA, that's the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association testing. But Benn, who's always maintained his innocence, appealed, and they have now reinstated him. However, that might not be the end of the story, because Benn remains under investigation by UK Anti-Doping and the British Boxing Board of Control, and whilst that is ongoing, he wouldn't be licensed to box in the UK. However, it is possible that he will be able to find another country and an alternative jurisdiction to box in. So just to confirm, Conor Benn to return to the WBC rankings after his highly elevated consumption of eggs was deemed a reasonable explanation for his failed drug test ahead of his scheduled bout with Chris Eubank Jr. last year.
A lot of people say Conor's failed test, but it was clinically termed an adverse finding. And I'm going to repeat again, like I was repeating all last year. An adverse finding is not necessarily a failed test. It may prove to be a failed test with further investigation, but it's just an adverse finding. Like, this is clinical language, like what people should understand now. If they were going to say failed test, it would say failed test. That's what it would say. I think a lot of people had their witch hunt hat on, and they wanted to get at Conor because that's the society we live in. There's always somebody who we want to get at, and back then it was Conor. But his failed test or his adverse finding, whatever one makes you happy, has been explained away for highly elevated consumption of eggs. The WBC said it's a reasonable explanation. Benn tested for clomiphene in October, which put the Chris Eubank fight to bed. After the adverse findings were uncovered, the British Boxing Board of Control prohibited Benn's bout with Eubank from taking place, and the promoters eventually cancelled it. Well, what they're not saying is the British Boxing Board of Control had this information for near on 2 months. They had all the information as long as Conor and Eddie Hearn. That's a fact. And until the Mole leaked the story, they weren't going to do nothing. Fight was cancelled. WBC ruling says, 1, there was no conclusive evidence that Benn engaged in intentional or knowing ingestion of clomiphene. There were no failures in the procedures related to sample collection, sample analysis, or violations of Mr. Benn's B sample rights that require questioning or invalidating the adverse finding. And 3, Mr. Benn's documented and highly elevated consumption of eggs during the times relevant to the sample collection raised a reasonable explanation for the adverse finding. It's funny, I was watching a video the other day, and there is a diet where athletes or people into fitness and these new age diets do eat a considerable amount of eggs, maybe even 10 at one sitting. It's called the stinking fart diet, but it does exist. So Benn will be reinstated to the WBC rankings today, I believe. When they update whatever rankings you have at hand, you should see his name. He's still under investigation by UKAD and the British Boxing Board of Control. They said he will not be licensed to box in the UK until the UKAD investigation is dealt with. But you would imagine that if UKAD didn't catch him with anything, it was the VADA testing that brought the adverse finding about, that the British Boxing Board of Control are going to buckle very quickly. I guess now the WBC have exonerated Conor, that Eddie and Conor will hand over the 270-page dossier to UKAD and the British Boxing Board of Control. And it will be business as usual, I would assume. Although they may choose not to relicense with the British Boxing Board of Control and fight in America. That's what they may choose to do. Eddie is not impressed with the board at all. He's not impressed. Conor threatened to put his lawyers on him. Between when Conor was tested and the Eubank fight getting cancelled, Eddie said it cost £1 million in expenditure with them thinking the fight was going ahead, because they thought the fight was going ahead up until late, Eddie and Wasserman, and that's through the British Boxing Board of Control. And when I was trying to explain that to people, because they were so hell-bent on hanging Conor, it's like they couldn't hear anything else what people were saying. And Eddie knows he's not going to get reimbursed that money by the board. For one, they haven't got that kind of money. Now, I'm not here to gloat that Conor was innocent, because there were stages where I was skeptical how it was going to go, right? And the truth is, what do I get out of it? It's just clinical language. Like, if you're following this channel, if you're not down with the clinical language thing and you're all in your feelings, it probably won't work that well for you, this channel. Probably won't work that well. I get nothing out of it to gloat about that. What do I get out of it? There's other boxing to watch. Conor Benn is not the only boxer to watch. It is what it is. I'm glad he's back. I like watching him box. I hope the Pacquiao fight happens. Some people say, you want to fight a 40-year-old Pacquiao? Yeah, why not? Why not? Punch him up. Punch up Manny, then after that, it's got to be ranked contenders. Got to be. All you can do if you're Joshua BUATSI is keep your composure, I guess, because the uncertainty of what's happening next when you're on a roster like Matchroom, with so much big players involved in discussions like these. I mean, you got BETERBIEV, you got BIVOL, you got Canelo in the mix, you got Callum Smith, and Hearn is saying he wants BIVOL BETERBIEV in Abu Dhabi this summer. That'll be for undisputed at 175. But he has declared that Joshua BUATSI is ready to step in should the holy month of Ramadan preclude BETERBIEV from boxing in May or June. Ramadan runs from March till April, if my information serves me correct. A lot of people thought that BUATSI versus BIVOL was signed, but it's not signed, according to Eddie. It's not signed. That rumoured date was supposed to be May. And Hearn said he also plans to deliver Saul Canelo Alvarez the rematch with BIVOL in September, which obviously will put paid to the BETERBIEV fight, and perhaps BIVOL could get a run out for the Canelo fight and BUATSI gets his title shot. I'd rather see the undisputed fight. As much as I'm a supporter of Joshua BUATSI, I'd rather see BIVOL BETERBIEV. But Hearn is saying he can't get Canelo to stop talking about the rematch. He's desperate for that rematch. But it's John Ryder first in May for Canelo. You better not look ahead of John Ryder. He better not. He better not. He's saying here that BIVOL versus BUATSI will probably land in America, but he'd be open to doing it in the UK. Why America? No one knows Joshua BUATSI out there. And BIVOL's not a big star out there. Surely the O2, South London, not South, South, would be the venue, surely. Or the Middle East. Now, it's been suggested that BUATSI is about to jump ship with his contract up, but Hearn says he still holds matching rights and has no intentions of letting him leave. He has matching rights with his agreement, which we are going to exercise, Hearn added. Matching rights means we would have to match whatever offer he gets. He's under contract with matching rights, but his contract of the amount of fights he's had with Matchroom is up. Eddie said he's anticipating an offer from Sky that they'd have to match, and maybe from Frank Warren and BT too. So where they wasn't willing to match Sky's matching rights with Lawrence Akoli, Eddie will match whatever Sky come up with. And they're saying maybe Frank Warren and BT, who are now TNT Sports. BT is now TNT Sports. BT Sports are about to rebrand as TNT Sports in the UK and Ireland from July 2023. The new name follows the establishment of the joint venture between BT Group and Warner Bros. Discovery WBD, and will be in place ahead of the start of the 2023/25 football season. Interesting. We'll dig into that a little more, if it affects boxing, of course. This should have been Chris Eubank's fight, but judging on the last showing, he might not have done that well against Janibek. But judging on Janibek's last showing, a lot of people are not too sure about this boogeyman reputation they gave him. They're not too sure. But Liam Smith has been offered a mandatory title fight in a second weight class, and that will be to take on the WBO middleweight champion, Alam Kunulai. So the sanctioning body ordered the fight on Wednesday with a 20-day negotiation period to work out terms before heading to a purse bid hearing. As they're saying here in Boxing Scene, Liam is on the hook to honour a rematch clause recently triggered by Chris Eubank Jr. But boxer, double X, Benn needs a world champion. He needs a world champion. All right, he's got Lawrence Okoli, but you could always do with more, can't you? Well, Lawrence hasn't actually signed. His next fight is on Sky, but he hasn't actually signed yet. And there's a lot of legal red tape to go through before that situation is done and dusted. So basically, the rematch clause could kill any opportunities for Smith to get a world title shot. And boxing scene are asking here, that is of course if he's interested in the fight. Liam Smith has all of a sudden become hot property. Billy Joe Saunders, he seemed to want to fight with him as well. A lot of people are going to be cursing rematch clauses. Well, don't sign them then. You curse rematch clauses and you never look at the fighter who signs them and then finds themselves compromised from taking the opportunities that open up after they win a significant fight. Don't sign them. Would Bob send Janibek to the UK? Because it's a bigger fight in the UK. And a lot of these Eastern Europeans can't sell in America. They do better in Britain. Like trying to hold the Joshua BUATSI BIVOL fight in America is pointless. It's pointless. BIVOL can't fight in America unless he's fighting Canelo. Or maybe a Joe Smith. Putting BIVOL in against BUATSI in America is pointless. So if that falls through, Liam Smith, Janibek, it will be Miralim Nursultanov. 18-0 with 10 knockouts. Never heard of him. You know, like, that's just another fight that Janibek will take and people will be like, who gives a fuck? No disrespect to the people in that region of the world. Got love for you, got some great boxers. But people are just going to be saying it's another Eastern European fighter. Or is that Central Asian? I think, the grammar Nazis or geography Nazis came at me with. All right, Central Asian / Eastern European fighter with a long name. Now, he might prove himself to be a great fighter. But what can Bob Arum do with that fight in America, really? He'd prefer Liam Smith take the fight. Bring Janibek to the UK, perhaps. Or maybe you could bring Liam Smith to America. I think Liam Smith would be more popular than Nursultanov in America. Well done, Liam Smith, winning the big one. And opportunities are opening up, but that rematch clause has got you. So be careful about signing these rematch clauses if you have ambition beyond your next fight. Be careful.